At 11:23 local time, a quiet but unmistakable shift rippled across the Red Sea. One that most headlines barely scratched the surface of, and that very few outlets bothered to unpack in any real depth. Three massive American supercarriers weren't simply rotating out or swapping duties in some routine schedule. They were deliberately stacking up together in a show of concentrated power. For the first time in more than 20 years, the United States had three complete carrier battle groups operating side by side in the same hot zone, creating a level of naval presence that immediately changes the entire strategic equation across the region. Yet the bigger picture is just the three you can spot on any map right now if you pull up a tracking site. It's the fourth one you don't see. The one sitting quietly back in Norfolk, Virginia. Engines cooled down, but every system checked, and every sailor ready to move at a moment's notice. That unseen carrier is quietly reshaping how everyone from Tehran to trading floors in London is calculating the risks ahead. Hey everyone, welcome back to Global Truth Pulse, where we cut through the endless noise of cable news sound bites and deliver straight talk on the stories that actually move the world and affect your daily life. If you're tired of surface-level takes that leave you with more questions than answers, and you value honest, no-spin analysis that helps you connect the dots between distant events and your own wallet or security, hit that subscribe button right now and join our growing family of truth seekers who refuse to settle for the hype or the half-truths. Your support keeps this kind of in-depth work going strong. Before we dive deeper into what this all really means, drop a quick note in the comments. Tell me where you're tuning in from. Your country? Your city? Maybe even the time zone you're in. Because the moves happening in the Persian Gulf over the next few days could ripple out and affect every corner of the planet. From fuel prices at your local pump, to supply chains halfway around the globe that put food on your table or goods in your stores. Stick around, because this is one situation you really need to grasp in full if you want to stay ahead of what's coming. Exactly at 11:23 local time, something out of the ordinary unfolded up in the northern Red Sea, and hardly any reports gave the complete context or explained the long-term implications. A third American supercarrier eased into place about 180 nautical miles northwest of Bab el-Mandeb, with the kind of precision that only comes from months of careful planning. This wasn't some routine handoff or a quick port call designed to show the flag and then leave. It was reinforcement pure and simple, adding fresh capabilities to an already formidable lineup. With that one maneuver, the U.S. Navy pulled off a feat it hadn't managed in over 2 decades, signaling a serious escalation in commitment. The ship in question was the USS George H.W. Bush, fresh off a lengthy voyage from Norfolk Naval Station that took it all the way around the Cape of Good Hope to link up with the USS Gerald R. Ford, already stationed in the Red Sea. Meanwhile, farther east in the Arabian Sea, the USS Abraham Lincoln held its ground roughly 280 nautical miles southeast of the Strait of Hormuz, acting as a steady anchor for the eastern flank, 3 nuclear-powered supercarriers. 3 self-contained strike groups, 3 overlapping layers of escorts and support that create a virtual net across critical waterways. Between them, they now controlled every major entry and exit route into and out of the Persian Gulf, effectively turning the whole area into a monitored corridor. The raw scale jumps out when you look at the numbers. Across those 3 groups, you're looking at roughly 240 fighter and attack aircraft, a dozen surface warships bristling with advanced weaponry, and about 15,000 sailors and Marines all concentrated in one theater. The last time Washington had 3 carriers operating simultaneously in U.S. Central Command's area was right at the start of Operation Iraqi Freedom back in 2003. And that historical echo alone should tell you just how seriously things are heating up and why this moment feels so different from the usual patrols. The deployment went public on April 24th when the Pentagon released a straightforward graphic mapping out the Lincoln, Ford, and Bush positions. That image spread like wildfire across defense forums and social media. Analysts everywhere pored over it line by line. Foreign governments scrutinized every detail with their own intelligence teams. And inside Iran, military planners studied it most intently, because the layout left them with almost no easy escape routes or hidden paths for their operations. Suddenly, every key path for Iranian oil exports sat squarely inside the kill zone of at least one American carrier strike group, turning routine shipping into a high-stakes gamble. To really get why this matters, and why it's not just another naval exercise, let's break down what each carrier actually brings to the table in practical terms. The Lincoln, positioned in the Arabian Sea, packs F-35C stealth fighters alongside Super Hornets and electronic warfare jets that can jam enemy signals on the fly. Those stealth birds can slip in close to the Iranian coastline without lighting up coastal radars, giving the U.S. a silent, persistent edge that makes surprise almost impossible for the other side. The Ford, anchoring the Red Sea side, is the Navy's most cutting-edge flat-top yet. Its electromagnetic launch system gets planes airborne faster, and with far less downtime than the old steam catapults ever could, meaning more sorties and quicker responses when things heat up. And the Bush layers on extra staying power and precision strike muscle with its own full complement of Super Hornets, allowing sustained operations over longer periods without fatigue setting in for the air crews. But the carriers themselves are only the headline act that grabs attention in the media. Around each one sits a protective ring of Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, their SPY-1 phased array radars constantly sweeping the skies and feeding data into a shared network that turns separate ships into one seamless fighting unit. That network lets one ship spot a threat while another launches the interceptor. No wasted seconds, no gaps in coverage. Beneath the waves, fast attack submarines prowl silently, keeping watch in the tricky waters of the Gulf of Oman, where underwater acoustics can play tricks on even the best sensors. The reason behind this massive show of force isn't some big mystery or hidden agenda that requires reading between the lines. Iran is bleeding an estimated $500 million every single day in lost oil export income because of the squeeze on its shipping lanes. And that financial pressure is mounting week after week. Regional tensions have shot up fast as a result. Ceasefire talks in Islamabad feel shaky at best, with both sides posturing and little real progress visible. Instead of long speeches or diplomatic niceties, Washington is drawing a very clear line on the map through sheer presence. 3 carriers crammed into one theater isn't about showing up for photos. It's about applying real, sustained pressure that forces choices on the other side. Still, even with this wall of American naval, might parked right on Iran's front porch and visible to anyone with basic satellite access, every serious observer is asking the same tough question that keeps coming up in private briefings. What if 3 carriers simply aren't enough to cover every possible scenario? What if Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy tries a coordinated, multi-pronged attack that hits several areas at once in a carefully timed swarm? What if the fragile ceasefire falls apart completely and fighting spills over in unpredictable ways? The answer to those questions isn't floating in the Red Sea or the Arabian Sea where the action is visible. It's waiting back in Norfolk, Virginia. And that's where the story really starts to get interesting, and the deeper strategy reveals itself. Look past the carriers for a second, and you see the full defensive architecture they rely on to stay effective. Each strike group is basically a floating fortress, every element with its own critical role that supports the others in a layered defense. The Lincoln covers the eastern approaches to the Strait of Hormuz, its stealth fighters and electronic attack planes ready to respond instantly to fast boats or coastal missile sites near Bandar Abbas, while also gathering intelligence on the move. The Ford and Bush together lock down the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, that narrow 16 nautical mile choke point between Yemen and Djibouti that any ship trying to reroute around the Strait of Hormuz via the Suez Canal has to pass through. The Ford's advanced launch tech and the Bush's extra air wing give that sector serious punch and staying power for round-the-clock patrols that can adapt to changing threats hour by hour. Every carrier is ringed by those Arleigh Burke destroyers, whose radars and networked fire control systems can hand off targets seamlessly across the group. The SM-6 missiles they carry can reach out more than 130 nautical miles, knocking down incoming cruise missiles long before they even lock on and turning potential dangers into non-events. Ticonderoga-class cruisers often act as the group's air defense quarterbacks, handling bigger ballistic and cruise threats at ranges and altitudes the destroyers alone can't manage on their own. And underwater, Los Angeles and Virginia-class subs provide silent protection against Iran's own submarine fleet in those shallow, noisy waters where sound travels in complicated patterns. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy knows the playbook too and has spent years preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. They've got swarms of fast attack craft, high-speed vessels that can hit 40 to 60 knots, pre-positioned in underground bunkers around Bandar Abbas, Qasem Island, and Larak Island for rapid launch. These aren't meant for a head-on fight with an Aegis destroyer in open water. They're built to overwhelm defenses by coming from every direction at once, flooding the system with too many targets and hoping at least one slips through. On top of that, mobile coastal launchers fire Noor and C-802 anti-ship missiles that can reach 120 to 170 kilometers, and they scoot away right after firing to avoid counterstrikes. Add in Shahed-style loitering drones that hug the waves to shorten reaction time for defenders, and you've got a layered, asymmetric threat designed exactly for the kind of pressure cooker moment we're watching unfold right now. On paper, the three-carrier setup looks airtight and almost unbeatable. But every experienced military planner notices the same built-in vulnerability that can't be ignored. Each group is stretched across its own sector, and if one has to peel off to handle a sudden flare-up somewhere else, a gap instantly opens that could be exploited. That's the math problem nobody can ignore, no matter how advanced the technology gets. Picture it from Iran's viewpoint: a coordinated rush of fast boats in the Strait of Hormuz, simultaneous missile barrages against the Lincoln's screen, and a sneaky mine-laying operation slipping through the temporary hole created by the response. The current triangle forces tough calls. Cover one spot better and leave another exposed for a critical window of time. It's not a lack of firepower or training. It's simple arithmetic that even the best planners have to respect. And that's precisely why the fourth carrier changes everything and could tip the balance in ways that alter the entire game. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, hull number CVN-69, sits right now in Norfolk, finishing up its post-deployment maintenance with crews working around the clock. On the surface, it looks idle and out of the picture. In reality, it's the missing piece that could make the whole formation unbreakable. From 2023 to 2024, the Eisenhower and its crew spent nearly 9 months in these exact waters, battling Houthi drone swarms and anti-ship missiles day after day in conditions that mirror today's tensions. They've already lived through this kind of fight and learned hard lessons along the way. The sailors aboard aren't just trained. They're battle-hardened veterans who understand the local currents, the way Iranian proxies operate in practice, how drones sneak in low and slow, how fast boats blend into commercial traffic to mask their approach, and how shore-based missiles try to blind air cover before the surface rush begins. That institutional knowledge doesn't rotate evenly across the fleet. It lives inside that crew and gives them an edge no amount of new hardware can fully replicate. If the order came and the Eisenhower sailed into the Central Arabian Sea to fill the gap, the coverage gap headache would vanish almost overnight. Every threat direction would be backed by a group that no longer has to abandon its zone to respond elsewhere, creating a seamless web of protection. The whole formation becomes mutually supporting instead of stretched thin and reactive. The fourth carrier doesn't just add more planes and missiles. It fixes the one structural flaw the current setup can't solve by itself, turning a strong presence into an overwhelming one. The ripple effects stretch way beyond the Gulf and touch economies and lives far from the water. Iran's daily $500 million oil revenue hit is hammering its economy harder with every passing week, straining budgets and political alliances at home. The longer these carriers stay on station, the tighter the squeeze on Tehran's finances and political stability as internal pressures build. Allies in the region are watching every move with keen interest. Energy markets in Asia and Europe are recalibrating in real time as traders adjust positions. Insurance rates for ships threading the Strait of Hormuz have spiked dramatically, and commodity traders are updating their forecasts almost daily to account for potential disruptions. Different experts see it different ways depending on their perspective. Some say three carriers already looks overly aggressive and could spark an unintended clash through miscalculation. Others insist this visible strength is exactly what's preventing a slide into chaos, because Iran can plainly see the cost of choosing conflict and the overwhelming response it would trigger. Both sides agree on one thing, though. Bringing in the Eisenhower would shift the entire signal from pressure to full readiness, and from readiness to something that feels a lot closer to a final warning that leaves little room for doubt. That's why the fourth carrier matters so much even while it's still thousands of miles away and technically in reserve. Before we talk about what might happen next, pause and ask yourself the same quiet question defense planners in every capital are wrestling with behind closed doors. Would sending that fourth supercarrier be a masterstroke of deterrence that prevents escalation, or would it cross a line that drags the whole region closer to open conflict? Both arguments have real weight, and they sit at the heart of the calculations happening right now in Washington, Tehran, and every energy-dependent government trying to balance security with stability. The comment section is the perfect spot to share your take and join the conversation, because whatever unfolds in the coming weeks won't stay a regional story confined to maps. It could reshape global power balances in ways that hit every household tied to oil prices, shipping costs, or international trade for months or even years to come. The triggers that could turn the Eisenhower from reserve asset to active deployment are out in the open for anyone paying attention. A total breakdown of the Islamabad ceasefire, especially if Iran walks away publicly and rejects further talks, would be one clear trigger. A coordinated IRGC strike that actually exploits a gap in the three-carrier screen and causes real damage would be another that changes the rules. A confirmed mine strike against a U.S. or escorted vessel in the Strait of Hormuz would almost certainly cross the current rules of engagement line and demand a stronger reply. Any of those happening while talks are clearly stalled could flip the switch from preparation to action in hours. Iran's commanders know the score and weigh these factors constantly. The $500 million daily loss is the number they carry into every meeting as a painful reminder. The three-carrier triangle is the geography they can't ignore or maneuver around easily. And the fact that a fourth carrier, crewed by the most experienced sailors the U.S. Navy has for exactly this threat environment, is sitting ready in Norfolk is the quiet message Washington doesn't even have to broadcast out loud. Right now, the Eisenhower's job is preparation, and preparation held in reserve. When the other side knows exactly what it means and what it can deliver, becomes a form of deterrence all by itself. The talks in Islamabad will decide whether that preparation stays on the sidelines or turns into orders to sail and join the fight. If diplomacy stalls and the ceasefire collapses while the IRGCN makes its play, that fourth point on the map is already crewed, already armed, and already intimately familiar with this exact fight from recent experience. For anyone who wants to stay ahead of developments as this situation evolves, the smartest play is simple and reliable. Track official Pentagon releases for the facts, follow credible open-source satellite and shipping data from trusted analysts, and watch the diplomatic readouts coming out of Islamabad for subtle shifts in tone. Energy markets often move faster than press briefings, so keep an eye on insurance rates and crude oil prices. They can tip you off to what the pros are really thinking behind closed doors before it hits the news. Skip the sources promising absolute certainty in a situation defined by uncertainty and fast-changing variables, and trust the ones that walk you through the logic instead of just shouting dramatic predictions. 3 supercarriers are already on station and making their presence felt every hour. The 4th hasn't moved yet, but it doesn't have to right now, because in this kind of high-stakes standoff, what counts is both what you see today on the map and what can show up tomorrow if the situation demands it. Both sides understand that reality perfectly and are factoring it into every decision. This is Global Truth Pulse, where we dig deeper than the headlines and stay with the story long after the rest of the media has moved on to the next shiny distraction. If this breakdown gave you the clear-eyed context you've been looking for amid all the confusion, do me a favor, subscribe, share the video with someone who appreciates real analysis, and leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from today. The next update is already in the works, and when things shift, you'll be among the first to understand exactly what it means for you and the wider world. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay right here with us.